The Last Straw. How to Negotiate When You Think You Have No Options. By David Russo. Chapter 1. The Moment You Think You're Trapped. There is a precise instant when a negotiation becomes truly risky. It's not when voices get louder. It's not when the offer worsens. It's not even when a threat is finally stated. It's the instant a quiet conclusion forms in your mind. I don't have a choice. That belief alters everything. The body reacts first. Your breath shortens. Your focus tunnels. You stop scanning for possibilities and start searching for escape routes. Only you're convinced none exist. Time shrinks. Seconds feel heavy. Urgency presses in from every side. This is the point where people consent to terms they'll later resent. This is where bluffs collapse, or never happen at all. This is where self-respect slips out unnoticed. If this feels familiar, hear this clearly. You didn't fail. There's nothing defective about you. This response is human. It's neurological. And it's reliable. Pressure narrows perception. When you feel cornered, the brain switches to survival mode. Survival mode doesn't care about clever solutions or long-term consequences. It wants relief now. It wants the discomfort to end. And it will accept nearly any agreement that promises immediate escape. That's why the most dangerous line in negotiation isn't, "Take it or leave it." The most dangerous line is the one you whisper to yourself. I have no options. Here's what almost no one tells you at the moment you need it most. That thought is usually unfinished. It feels accurate. It sounds rational, but it's rarely complete. And until you learn to notice this internal shutdown, this mental free fall, you'll negotiate from a position far weaker than necessary. Let's clarify something early. This book isn't about pretending to have power you lack. It's not about manipulation, dominance, or fake confidence. And it's certainly not about wishing away real consequences. It's about learning how to slow things down just enough to see what pressure is concealing. Because pressure conceals a lot. It conceals time. It conceals alternatives. It conceals forms of leverage that don't look like leverage at first glance. Most critically, it conceals your freedom to choose your response. When people later say, "I didn't have a choice," what they usually mean is, "I couldn't see another move quickly enough." That difference is everything. Think back to the last situation where you felt boxed in. Maybe it involved money, maybe work, maybe a relationship, a contract, or a conversation with someone who held power over you. Without judgment, just notice. Did everything feel rushed? Did you feel observed or evaluated? Did it seem like hesitation would be punished? Those conditions don't happen by accident. They are the perfect breeding ground for poor decisions. This audiobook is built for those situations. Not the textbook negotiation. Not the calm meeting where you have multiple offers and plenty of time. This is for the conversation where your throat tightens, where the stakes feel personal, where walking away feels unthinkable. In those moments, your first move is not to push back, not to issue threats, not even to bluff. Your first move is to stop the internal collapse. That begins by slowing the moment, outside and inside. Externally, that can sound like, "I need some time to consider this. I'm not ready to decide yet. Let's pause here." Internally, it's even simpler. "I don't have to resolve this right now." That shift alone can redirect the entire negotiation. Because once things slow down, something changes. Options start to surface. They might not be ideal. They might not feel safe or comfortable. But they exist, and the existence of options means you are not trapped. As this book continues, you'll learn how to spot this moment earlier. You'll learn how to create space without triggering conflict. You'll learn when bluffing strengthens your position and when it quietly undermines it. And you'll learn how to uncover leverage where none seems to exist. But it all starts here, with the moment you believe you're stuck. If you can pause there, even briefly, you reclaim something most people surrender too soon. One more move. And as long as you have another move, the negotiation isn't over. Chapter 2. The Illusion of No Options. When people say they had no options, what they're usually describing is not reality. It's compression. Pressure compresses time. Pressure compresses attention. Pressure compresses imagination. And when everything is compressed, it feels like the walls are closer than they actually are. The illusion of no options doesn't come from weakness. It comes from context. Certain conditions make options disappear, even when they're still there. The first condition is urgency. Urgency is powerful because it doesn't argue with you. It announces itself as fact. This has to be decided now. If you don't act, you lose. This offer won't be here tomorrow. Sometimes urgency is real. Often, it's exaggerated. But your nervous system doesn't know the difference. It reacts the same way either way. Urgency narrows your thinking from what could I do to what must I do, and must is the language of traps. The second condition is authority. When the other person appears to have power over outcomes, your job, your freedom, your access, your reputation, you instinctively downgrade your own agency. You defer. You comply. You stop testing assumptions. Authority doesn't have to be loud. In fact, quiet authority is often more effective. A calm statement like, "This is how it works," can erase options faster than a threat ever could. But authority is not the same as inevitability. Many people confuse the two. The third condition is sunk cost. By the time you reach a last straw moment, you've usually invested something: time, money, pride, effort, or identity. Walking away doesn't just feel inconvenient. It feels like erasing part of yourself. So instead of asking, "What's the best move now?" you ask, "How do I justify everything I've already put into this?" That question shrinks your options dramatically. The fourth condition is emotional exhaustion. When you're tired, really tired, your brain stops exploring. It settles. It looks for the shortest path out of discomfort. That's why people agree to bad terms late at night, after long meetings, or at the end of drawn-out conflicts. Exhaustion doesn't remove options. It removes your ability to see them. Put these conditions together: urgency, authority, sunk cost, and exhaustion, and you get something that feels airtight. A sealed room. But here's what matters. The room is usually sealed from the inside. This doesn't mean the pressure isn't real. It means the conclusion drawn from it often is. One of the most reliable signs you're experiencing the illusion of no options is this thought: "If I don't agree to this, everything falls apart." That sentence deserves scrutiny every time it appears. Because everything is rarely that simple. Something might fall apart. Something might change. Something might become uncomfortable. But collapse is often assumed, not proven. This is where people make their most damaging moves. Not because they were forced, but because they didn't question the frame they were handed. Frames matter. If the frame is "decide now," you'll rush. If the frame is "take it or leave it," you'll polarize. If the frame is "this is your only chance," you'll cling. But frames are not facts. And one of your most underrated negotiation skills is the ability to reframe silently before you respond. Instead of, "I have no options," try, "I haven't identified my options yet." That small shift creates mental space. Instead of, "This is the end," try, "This is a pressure point." Pressure points can be used. They can also be endured. In the chapters ahead, we'll talk about how to buy time, how to use ambiguity responsibly, and how to apply leverage that doesn't look like leverage. But all of those tools depend on one thing first: your willingness to doubt the feeling of finality. Finality is seductive. It promises certainty. But in negotiation, certainty under pressure is often an illusion. You don't need to feel confident right now. You don't need to feel strong. You only need to resist the urge to conclude too quickly. Because the moment you accept that you might be wrong about having no options, you regain something critical: curiosity. And curiosity is the doorway through which options return. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how to slow the moment, practically, verbally, and psychologically, without escalating the situation or exposing weakness. Because before you negotiate the outcome, you have to negotiate the pace. And pace changes everything. Chapter 3. Slow the moment before you say anything. Most people assume negotiation starts the instant someone speaks. It doesn't. It starts with pace. Who rushes? Who waits? Who feels compelled to respond first? Pressure almost always comes with acceleration. The other side pushes speed not because it's required, but because haste makes people pliable. Quick choices crack easily. If this chapter leaves you with one idea, let it be this: you are never required to answer immediately. Not a demand. Not an ultimatum. Not an awkward silence meant to provoke you. Nothing erodes your leverage faster than talking before you're grounded. Slowing the moment isn't avoidance or hesitation. It is an uncertainty. It's a conscious move that gives your thinking room to return. When tension is high, your task is not to fix the situation. Your task is to make sure it isn't fixed on someone else's terms. That begins by interrupting the instinct to react. When someone presents conditions and then waits, they're often counting on a basic human discomfort: silence. Most people rush to eliminate it. They clarify. They defend. They give ground. Silence, when used intentionally, reverses that flow. Silence hands the pressure back. When you don't answer right away, doubts start forming on the other side. Did I overplay this? Are they seeing something I'm missing? Did I misjudge their position? You haven't offered a single word, yet the balance has already shifted. Sometimes, though, silence isn't enough, especially when the situation feels overwhelming. That's where neutral pause statements become useful. These are phrases that buy time without exposing your stance. For example, I need a moment to think about this. I'm not ready to respond yet. Let's stop here for now. Pay attention to what these do not do. They don't justify. They don't challenge. They don't explain. They simply suspend momentum. Many people resist using these lines because they fear how they'll be interpreted. They worry about appearing weak, hesitant, or disengaged. In practice, the opposite is usually true. Someone who can slow things down under pressure often comes across as controlled, intentional, and difficult to manipulate. Now consider deadlines. Deadlines are among the most powerful tools for manufacturing urgency. Some are genuine. Others are negotiable. Many exist only because no one questions them. You don't dismantle a deadline by rejecting it outright. You do it by examining it, or by refusing to absorb its urgency. You might ask, what actually happens if this waits? Who set this deadline? What changes if we revisit this later? These aren't aggressive questions. They're investigative. An investigation slows everything down. Slowing the moment also has an internal component, managing your physical state. If your breath is tight, your thinking will be narrow. If your jaw is locked, your words will sound combative. If your body is tense, your tone will give you away. Before responding, take one breath slower than your impulse suggests. Nothing theatrical, just enough to tell your nervous system this isn't a crisis. Because most negotiations are framed as emergencies when they aren't. When you slow things down both outwardly and inwardly, something critical happens. You take ownership of your response. You stop being pulled by pressure and start acting by choice. This is also where restraint becomes powerful, not as trickery, but as discipline. When you don't rush to reveal boundaries, you keep options open. When you don't broadcast anxiety, you deny the other side an opening. Slowing the moment gives you space to decide what to withhold. And in high-stakes situations, what remains unsaid often carries more weight than what's spoken. There will be moments when the pressure intensifies, when demands are repeated, when someone insists, I need an answer right now. That isn't a cue to hurry. It's confirmation that slowing down is having an effect. You are not required to mirror their urgency. You are not responsible for calming their impatience. You're allowed to move at a speed that protects your clarity. Once you control the pace, leverage starts to reveal itself, sometimes quietly, sometimes unexpectedly. That's where we're going next. Because when time slows, power finally has room to shift. Chapter 4. Leverage you don't realize you have. When people hear the word leverage, they usually think of something obvious. Money, status, options to walk away. And when they don't have those things, they assume they have no leverage at all. That assumption is one of the most expensive mistakes people make under pressure. Leverage is not just what you possess. It's what the other side needs, fears, or cannot easily replace. And very often, you have leverage you don't recognize because it doesn't look impressive from the inside. One form of leverage is time. If the other side needs a decision, an agreement, or compliance from you, they are exposed to delay. Even small delays can create discomfort, scrutiny, or risk for them. You don't need to threaten delay. You only need to be willing to tolerate it. Another form of leverage is uncertainty. People dislike uncertainty more than they dislike bad news. When you don't fully reveal your position, the other side has to plan for multiple possibilities. That planning costs them energy, attention, and sometimes political capital. You don't create uncertainty by lying. You create it by not oversharing. Silence, vagueness, and neutral language are not weaknesses. They are often leverage in disguise. Then there is procedural leverage. Who else needs to be involved? Who approves this? What steps haven't happened yet? Processes are slower and messier than ultimatums. When you reference process, you move the negotiation out of the emotional and into the structural. Statements like, I need to review this. This has to go through another step. I'm not the final decision maker on this. These statements shift pressure upward or outward, away from you. Another overlooked source of leverage is your participation. if your cooperation is required for the outcome to work. Even if you don't control the final decision, you matter more than you think. People often underestimate the cost of forcing compliance versus securing agreement. Resistance creates friction. Friction creates problems. And problems create risk. Your willingness to engage calmly and constructively has value. Even your limits can be leverage. When you clearly define what you won't do, you reduce the other side's room to push. Boundaries simplify negotiations by eliminating false hope. And paradoxically, clarity often earns respect. A calm statement like, "I won't agree to that." No justification. No apology. That's leverage. Not because it's aggressive, but because it's final. One of the reasons people miss their leverage is because they're looking for dominance instead of influence. Dominance is loud. Influence is subtle. Dominance says, "I can hurt you." Influence says, "You need this to work." Under last straw conditions, influence is usually more available than dominance. Another reason people miss leverage is emotional proximity. When the stakes are personal, it's harder to see the structure of the situation. You focus on outcomes and overlook mechanics. So here's a simple question to ask when you feel powerless. What becomes harder for them if I don't immediately comply? The answer to that question often reveals leverage hiding in plain sight. This doesn't mean you're guaranteed a favorable outcome. Leverage is not control. It is pressure you can apply or relieve. Sometimes your leverage is enough to improve the terms. Sometimes it's enough to buy time. Sometimes it's enough to exit with dignity instead of damage. That still matters. As you learn to recognize leverage that doesn't look like leverage, you'll also learn why bluffing can be effective or disastrous. Because bluffing is not about inventing leverage. It's about protecting the leverage you already have from being prematurely surrendered. That's where we're going next. In the next chapter, we'll talk about bluffing when there's no room for error, what it is, what it isn't, and how to use it without burning the ground beneath you. Because when you understand your leverage, even imperfect leverage, you stop negotiating from fear. And fear is never a good advisor. Chapter 5. Bluffing when there's no room for error. Bluffing gets a bad reputation. Movies make it look glamorous. High-stakes poker, secret schemes, dramatic reveals. Negotiation books make it look dangerous, lying, cheating, or manipulating. But real-world bluffing is simpler and far more subtle. Bluffing, at its core, is about managing perception under pressure. It's not about pretending to be stronger than you are. It's about protecting the flexibility you actually have. Most people consider bluffing only when they feel desperate. That's a mistake. Desperation makes bluffing sloppy. It leaks emotion. It signals weakness. The moment you're at the last straw, your goal is not to impress anyone. It's to survive and preserve options. Let's define what bluffing is in this context. Bluffing is the act of withholding certain information or framing your position ambiguously so that the other party cannot exploit your perceived weakness. It's controlled ambiguity. It's strategic silence. It's a pause that communicates, without words, that there are consequences the other side cannot ignore. Here's a key principle. Never bluff about what can be easily verified. If you claim something they can check in minutes, your credibility collapses. If your bluff is exposed too soon, you're weaker than if you had said nothing at all. A good rule of thumb: bluff only about perceptions, not facts. For example, instead of saying, "I have other offers," which may be true or false, you might say, "I'm exploring several paths, and I need to weigh them carefully." Notice the difference. You're not lying. You're creating uncertainty, buying time, and preserving your options. Another common mistake is over-explaining. People feel the need to justify every word of a bluff. The truth is, brevity is strength. A single, calm statement can communicate far more than a paragraph of rationalization. Silence following your statement often does the work your words cannot. Next, let's talk about timing. Timing is everything in bluffing. If you bluff too early, before pressure is real, it will be ignored. If you bluff too late, it may come across as reactive or desperate. The ideal moment is when pressure is high enough that your silence or ambiguity creates tension, but before desperation overtakes clarity. Bluffing works best when paired with boundaries. A boundary is simple. "I will not agree to X." Or, "This is the limit of what I can accept." Boundaries do two things. They protect you, and they make any bluff you employ more credible. Because the other side knows you cannot be pushed past a certain point. This is why bluffing and leverage are intertwined. You don't invent strength, you protect what you already have. Now, let's address an uncomfortable truth. Bluffing carries risk. Sometimes your bluff fails. Sometimes it is called. Sometimes the other side sees through your ambiguity. That's why it must be disciplined, purposeful, and controlled. If your bluff is sloppy, emotional, or reactive, it will make you weaker. If your bluff is deliberate, silent, and minimal, it will give you breathing room, space to find real options, regain composure, and shift the negotiation towards something manageable. Finally, remember this: bluffing is temporary. It's not a lifestyle. It's a bridge. Its goal is not to deceive endlessly. Its goal is to give you time, clarity, and leverage until real decisions can be made with dignity. A well-executed bluff will feel invisible to the listener because it is subtle. It does not dominate the conversation. It does not signal desperation. It simply shifts the balance enough to let you think, move, and protect yourself. In the next chapter, we'll take this further and talk about the last straw bluff, how to project resolve when options are limited, how to signal boundaries without angering the other side, and how to make a stand without burning bridges. Because bluffing is not about winning the moment, it's about surviving it strategically. Chapter 6: The Last Straw Bluff. There is a moment in negotiation when the stakes are at their highest, when your back truly is against the wall, and you can feel the weight of every decision pressing down on you. This is the moment that gives this book its name, the last straw moment. In these situations, bluffing is no longer a casual tool. It becomes a strategic signal, a way to project resolve without overextending yourself. This is the last straw bluff. The last straw bluff is not about trickery or lies. It is about clarity and controlled pressure. It communicates that you have limits, and that crossing them has consequences, even if your options are few. At its core, the last straw bluff is a statement of boundaries delivered with calm authority. For example, I cannot agree to that. This is the limit of what I can accept. I'm prepared to step away if this cannot be resolved within these conditions. Notice what these statements do not do. They do not beg, justify, or over-explain. They do not argue. They do not scream or threaten. They simply state what is true, and the other side is left to respond. This is where many people fail. When they feel desperate, they try to sell their bluff. They overcompensate. They panic. And when the bluff collapses under their own anxiety, it creates vulnerability instead of protection. The power of the last straw bluff lies in poise under pressure. When you remain calm, measured, and consistent, even a limited position looks credible. It projects control. It projects confidence. And it projects limits that the other side cannot ignore. A key part of executing a last straw bluff is timing. You do not announce it too early, before stakes are real, because it will be dismissed. You do not announce it too late, after desperation has already compromised your composure. The ideal moment is when the pressure is high enough to demand attention, but before panic sets in. Equally important is brevity. One calm statement is worth 10 explanations. The more you talk, the more you risk revealing doubt. The less you reveal, the stronger the bluff appears. Another critical element is consistency. Your statements, your tone, your body language, your willingness to walk away. Everything must align. Mixed signals will undermine the bluff instantly. Now let's discuss what this bluff does. It buys you two things: time and clarity. Time allows you to reassess your real options. You may discover leverage you didn't notice before, or a solution that was not apparent in the heat of the moment. Clarity allows you to act deliberately rather than react emotionally. The last straw bluff is also a test. It signals to the other party that you are not passive, that you are not desperate, and that you are willing to stand by your limits. How they respond tells you where real boundaries and opportunities lie. It is essential to understand that the last straw bluff is not guaranteed to succeed. Sometimes the other side will push back. Sometimes they will call your bluff. But that is why preparation matters. You must be willing to walk your stated line if necessary, because the bluff only works if it is credible. To make the bluff credible, combine three elements. 1. Clarity. Be explicit about your limits without over-explaining. 2. Calmness. Speak in a measured tone. Nervous energy undermines every word. 3. Consistency. Align words, actions, and demeanor. Mixed signals destroy credibility. When executed correctly, the The last straw bluff changes the dynamic entirely. It stops momentum that is carrying you toward compromise or error. It forces the other side to negotiate on terms closer to what you can actually handle. And it protects you from losing more than you must. Finally, understand that the last straw bluff is not a weapon of aggression. It is a tool of self-preservation and strategic communication. It does not dominate, it clarifies. It does not intimidate, it signals limits. It does not close options, it buys time for you to see the real path forward. The art of the last straw bluff is simple in theory, but powerful in practice. State your limits calmly, do not justify them unnecessarily, and be prepared to act if your boundaries are challenged. In the next chapter, we will explore the hidden option, the one you haven't seen yet. Many people think the last straw moment is final, but the truth is, if you've slowed the moment, protected your leverage, and executed your bluff correctly, one more path often exists, sometimes in plain sight, sometimes only visible once pressure begins to release. And recognizing that path is where survival turns into strategy. Chapter 7. The option you're not seeing. When people reach the last straw moment, they often say, "I have no choice." We've already explored why that thought is an illusion. But now it's time to dig deeper. There is almost always an option you haven't seen yet. Often, it is the option that changes everything. I call this the hidden option. It's called hidden because pressure blinds you. Urgency, authority, exhaustion, and fear narrow your perception. They shrink the world until only two possibilities seem visible: comply or walk away. But life, and negotiation, is rarely that simple. The hidden option is usually a reframe. It's not a miracle solution or a lucky break. It's a shift in perspective that reveals a path forward when you thought none existed. Here's a simple mental exercise to uncover it. 1. Step back. Literally pause. Take a breath. Let the urgency fade, even for a moment. 2. List your visible options. Usually, there are two. Say yes or say no. 3. Ask the what else question. What else can I do that hasn't been suggested? Who else could be involved? Can the terms be redefined? Can the timeline be adjusted? 4. Expand your frame. Sometimes the hidden option is a compromise you didn't initially consider, a partnership, a delay, or a small concession that preserves your core interests. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're negotiating a job offer, and the last straw moment comes. They demand a decision today, and you feel you have no leverage. The visible options seem clear: accept their terms or walk away. Now pause. Ask yourself, what else is possible? You might discover a hidden option: requesting a brief extension to review the offer, negotiating a flexible start date to accommodate another commitment, asking for additional benefits in place of salary, clarifying the role or responsibilities to make the position manageable. All of these are viable paths that remain invisible if you panic or rush. The hidden option often requires creativity and courage. It's the idea that negotiation is not a binary choice. It's a multidimensional problem with multiple solutions, but stress and urgency trick you into seeing only two. Here's a crucial point. Uncovering the hidden option doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees that you are acting from clarity rather than fear. And clarity is far more powerful than desperation. Another way to find hidden options is to shift the focus of the negotiation. Instead of debating the terms you cannot change, explore what can be adjusted. Instead of fighting over the outcome that feels like a last straw, ask, what problem is the other side really trying to solve? Or instead of assuming compliance or conflict, create collaboration. Sometimes the hidden option is a small, seemingly insignificant choice that unlocks major leverage. For example, agreeing to a minor adjustment now can buy trust and open doors you didn't know existed. The final key to uncovering hidden options is perspective. Distance creates clarity. Step back from the heat of the moment and view the situation as an observer. Ask yourself, what would I advise a friend to do in this situation? What would I do if I weren't under pressure? What possibilities am I dismissing because they seem uncomfortable? Hidden options often hide behind discomfort. Fear, pride, or uncertainty keeps you from seeing them. The moment you identify the hidden option, your world expands. Suddenly, you are no longer trapped. You have a path that wasn't visible before. And even if that path is not perfect, it gives you agency. Agency is everything. Remember, survival and negotiation is not about being the loudest, the strongest, or the smartest. It's about recognizing your real options, even the ones that seem invisible at first. In the next chapter, we'll explore emotional control when everything is on the line. Because discovering hidden options is only part of the battle, to act on them effectively, you must remain calm, deliberate, and focused under pressure. Without control, even the best option can be squandered. Chapter 8. Emotional control when everything is on the line. Pressure is a tricky thing. It doesn't just make decisions harder, it changes you from the inside out. When your back is against the wall, your heart races, your thoughts narrow, and your instincts push you toward immediate action. Fear, anger, frustration, and panic become louder than reason. And in that moment, negotiation becomes less about strategy and more about survival. The first truth about emotional control is simple: you cannot ignore emotion. Trying to stay calm by suppressing feelings almost always backfires. The body doesn't respond to mental commands alone. If your chest is tight, your muscles tense, your voice rises, you will still signal stress, even if your mind is telling you otherwise. Emotional control is not suppression. It is management. It is the ability to acknowledge what you feel without letting it dictate your actions. Let's break that down into practical steps. Step 1. Recognize your triggers. Ask yourself, what makes me react immediately? What situations push me to concede too quickly? What words or gestures from the other side spike my anxiety? Recognition creates distance. When you know your triggers, you can pause before reacting. That pause is powerful. It creates space between instinct and action. Step 2. Regulate your physiology. Stress affects the body first. Shallow breathing, clenched jaws, and tight shoulders make your thinking rigid. To counter this, focus on small, deliberate actions. Take a slow, deep breath before responding. Loosen your jaw, your shoulders, your hands. Pause for one beat before speaking. These are subtle, almost imperceptible shifts, but they signal to your nervous system that you are not in immediate danger. They also make your tone and body language appear composed, even under pressure. Step 3. Reframe the pressure. Pressure is not only a threat, it is information. Urgency and tension tell you what the other side cares about, what they fear, and where they are vulnerable. Instead of viewing pressure as a trap, see it as a map. Ask yourself, what is driving this urgency? What are they trying to protect? How does this pressure create space for me to act? This perspective shifts your emotional response from panic to curiosity. Curiosity is a stabilizer. Step 4. Name the emotion internally. Silently labeling your feelings. I feel anxious. I feel frustrated. I feel rushed. Creates distance from them. Naming the emotion is not weakness, it is acknowledgement. Once recognized, emotion can be managed rather than acted on impulsively. Step 5. Focus on the next deliberate action. When emotions surge, the mind wants to solve everything at once. The trick is to concentrate on one next move. That move might be as simple as pausing, asking a clarifying question, or repeating your boundary. This focus turns emotional energy into strategic energy. Panic is diffused. Anxiety is harnessed. Finally, remember that emotional control is practice, not perfection. You will not always remain calm. You will occasionally react. The difference is how quickly you regain composure. Even a single, deliberate pause can reset a high-pressure negotiation. Emotional control also interacts with every tool we've discussed so far: slowing the moment, bluffing, leveraging, and uncovering hidden options. Without control, these tools become clumsy or ineffective. With control, they become precise and powerful. Here's a simple mantra to reinforce emotional control in the heat of a last straw moment. Pause. Breathe. Observe. Choose. Pause. Stop the reflexive reaction. Breathe. Regulate your body. Observe. Recognize pressure, emotion, and options. Choose. Act deliberately from your best position. When you master even this basic sequence, pressure stops being a trap. It becomes a signal. It becomes an opportunity to see more clearly, act more deliberately, and protect what matters most. In the next chapter, we will explore exiting a bluff without getting caught. How to convert the tension and uncertainty you've created into real, safe outcomes. Because emotional control is useless if you cannot translate it into action. Chapter 9. Exiting a bluff safely. Bluffing, as we've discussed, is a tool, not a lifestyle. Its purpose is to protect you, create breathing room, and preserve options. But every bluff, no matter how subtle, eventually requires an exit. The way you exit determines whether you gain from the moment or lose everything you work to protect. Exiting a bluff safely begins with preparation. Before you ever enter a high-pressure situation, ask yourself, what is my line? How far am I willing to go? What is my real bottom? How will I respond if the bluff is called? The safest bluffs are the ones you are ready to follow through on. If you signal limits you cannot maintain, the bluff collapses instantly. Your credibility, leverage, and control vanish in a single misstep. Once the bluff is in motion, the first rule of exit is alignment. Your words, tone, and body language must remain consistent with your position. If you appear nervous, hesitant, or apologetic, the other side will sense weakness and test your limits. Even subtle inconsistencies can trigger aggressive responses or demands. Next is timing. The exit must be deliberate. You cannot rush or panic. The goal is to move from ambiguity to clarity smoothly, without escalation, without anger, and without revealing more than necessary. A simple example. You've hinted at walking away if a condition is not met. The other party presses. At this point, your exit is clear. Repeat your boundary calmly. I've stated my limit. I cannot go beyond this. Pause. Let them respond. If pressed further, act decisively, but without drama. Take the action you indicated. Stand by your boundary. Notice what you did not do. You did not explain, justify, or beg. You did not raise your voice. You simply acted in alignment with your stated limit. Another strategy is partial exits. Sometimes, the bluff doesn't need a full reveal. A small concession, a temporary agreement, or a minor compromise can allow you to exit the bluff without losing credibility or leverage. The key is controlling the narrative. Even in retreat, you maintain agency if you frame the move correctly. For example, I'm willing to adjust this point, but my limit remains clear. I cannot agree to everything today, but we can explore solutions that meet both our needs. Language matters. It signals confidence, preserves respect, and keeps the negotiation alive without collapsing your position. The next principle is observation. When you exit a bluff, watch the other party carefully. Their reactions often reveal hidden options or new leverage. Exiting gracefully can shift the power dynamic in your favor if you remain calm and attentive. Finally, remember the psychological element. Bluffing creates tension because people assume they can push you. Exiting safely demonstrates control. It shows that your boundaries are credible and that you are not swayed by pressure. This reinforces your leverage for the rest of the negotiation. There is one more subtle skill embedded in safe exits: emotional continuity. Even if the bluff is partially exposed, or if the other side presses harder than expected, maintaining your composure allows you to recover and redirect the conversation. Panic erases leverage. Calmness preserves it. Your ability to manage your emotional state is what transforms a tactical bluff into a sustainable strategy. In short, exiting a bluff safely requires 1. Preparation. Know your limits and bottom lines. 2. Alignment. Ensure your words, tone, and actions match your position. 3. Timing. Choose the moment carefully, don't rush. 4. Partial exits when necessary. Preserve credibility while adjusting. 5. Observation. Learn from reactions and adapt. 6. Emotional continuity. Remain calm, deliberate, and composed. When you master these principles, bluffing becomes a reliable tool instead of a dangerous gamble. It allows you to navigate last-straw moments with confidence, preserve your options, and act deliberately under pressure. In the next chapter, we will explore how to turn last-straw moments into opportunities, transforming situations that feel like endings into beginnings. Because surviving the pressure is only half the battle. Thriving afterward is the real skill. Chapter 10. Turning last-straw moments into opportunities. Most people see a last-straw moment as a trap. It feels like a wall, a point of no return, a moment where all options have vanished. But here's the secret. Last-straw moments are often the clearest opportunities. Pressure sharpens focus. Stakes force clarity. When everything is on the line, people and situations reveal themselves in ways they rarely do under normal conditions. The first step to turning these moments into opportunities is mental reframing. Instead of thinking, I have no choice, ask yourself, what is actually possible here? What leverage has emerged in this moment? What options might I uncover if I pause, breathe, and observe? This reframing transforms panic into curiosity. It opens the mind to solutions that were invisible under stress. Next, use everything you've learned so far, slowing the moment, recognizing leverage, bluffing when necessary, uncovering hidden options, and controlling emotion. Each tool alone helps. Together, they create space for creativity and strategic action. When combined, they allow you to convert apparent desperation into decisive action. One powerful approach is redefining success. In a last-straw scenario, people often focus on a single outcome, winning the deal, saying yes, avoiding loss. But negotiation and high-pressure situations are rarely binary. Success can take many forms. Preserving relationships for future collaboration, protecting your credibility and reputation, gaining information, insight, or leverage for the next step, creating small wins that build toward larger ones. Even a partial win is a victory if it moves you closer to long-term goals. Another key strategy is leveraging insight from the other side. Under extreme pressure, people reveal priorities, fears, and non-negotiables. Pay attention, ask questions, observe reactions. Sometimes, the last straw moment exposes leverage you didn't even know existed. Here's an example. Imagine a negotiation where the other side demands a final answer immediately. Most would panic. Most would say yes or say no and feel trapped. But if you slow the moment, manage emotion, and ask subtle questions, you might uncover that the deadline is arbitrary, the demand is flexible, or the other party has hidden constraints. Suddenly, what seemed like a trap becomes an opportunity to negotiate terms that were invisible at first. The third principle is creative reframing. Look beyond the obvious options. Ask, can roles or responsibilities be adjusted? Can the timeline shift? Can minor concessions create mutual benefit? Can collaboration replace conflict? Innovation often comes from constraint. When everything feels limited, your mind is forced to consider solutions it ignored in comfort. Finally, embrace agency. Pressure creates urgency, but it also reveals control. By slowing the moment, managing emotion, and recognizing leverage, you are not reacting, you are choosing. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are an active participant shaping the outcome. This is the ultimate opportunity hidden in last-straw moments. The chance to act with clarity, courage, and creativity when others are overwhelmed. The final lesson of this book is simple. What feels like the end is often the beginning. Every last-straw moment contains a pivot point. If you slow down, protect your position, recognize hidden leverage, manage your emotions, and explore options creatively, you can turn pressure into opportunity, threat into strategy, and crisis into progress. In practice, this means pause instead of reacting, observe instead of panicking, ask instead of assuming, protect your limits, but remain flexible. Seek opportunity where others see only risk. When you master this approach, last-straw moments no longer terrify you. They sharpen your instincts, reveal your strengths, and give you the chance to act with intention when the stakes are highest. Because surviving is important, but thriving is the real skill. And that is the final lesson. Every last straw is a test. How you respond transforms it from a breaking point into a launching point.